Hey everybody, it's Nick, Mystic Next Door, and this is a training I thought was really appropriate for the module and the foundation of self care, and it's something that I think that doesn't always get talked about in very clear ways, and so I wanted to just open up a conversation about this and give some food for thought to really look at how you're resting and what you're resting. Because I think there's often a misunderstanding that if we get enough sleep, then we must inherently be rested. But it's not always the case. Certainly you can go a night, just one night with a bad night's sleep, and you kind of feel the hit from that. Hey there, but. Uh, that's not all there is to it. There's a little more to the story. So, what I wanted to look at today was just a couple different kinds of rest to break it down in some different ways so that you can really look inside and say, well, what kind of rest do I need right now? What kind of rest is most important to me? So, as we mentioned, of course, there's physical rest. And I think there's maybe two kinds of this. One is more on the passive side. So it'd be like taking a nap. Naps are wonderful, right? I give you permission to take a nap if you want to take a nap. And then sleeping, of course. But then on the more passive side, there's restorative sorts of things that we can do without actually sleeping. That might be, well, one of my favorites is like a Yin Yoga practice. Very passive, very restorative in so many ways. It could be like a gentle sort of yoga practice like that. It could be getting a massage. It could be any number of other things like that where you're resting without necessarily being asleep. I don't know that I would include meditation in this, maybe, but not necessarily. We'll maybe get to that in a little bit though. But you could think about that. Well, does my body just need a little bit of rest? If you're feeling tired, do you need to lay down and take a nap? Do you need to, get yourself a massage? Have a little bit more extended rest. Do you need to do some yoga, something like that? And secondly, there's mental rest. So think about all the things that go on in our heads and all the background processing going on of taking in all the information from the day, all the different decisions that we need to make or have made, and or are coming up for us that we're kind of winding around in the back of the head. Well, that can be really exhausting. One of the things that I've noticed that's pretty common is at a certain point you're just done. Like your brain is just not braining any longer, and so you need to take a break. But most people don't just sit down and give themselves a little rest. They and do nothing. They pick up the phone and they start scrolling. They flip on something on the TV. They flip on some kind of music or some kind of something, to like block it out or to give something else to do. And mental rest is really just about having a little bit of space to let whatever needs to happen up there happen, right? Without winding in it. You can let things unwind in your brain without winding into all of the things that are up there. If you've ever gone for a nice long drive, you've probably done that. The kind of danger zone around this one is to let your brain start to just relax and release and just let it have, let it do its thing without winding into or actively trying to wind into the same things. It's just giving like a wandering kind of idea in the mind, right? Very, very helpful. Short breaks throughout the day are super, super helpful for this because it prevents that fatigue from building up. Because when you hit that hard stop, boy, that's a time when it's really important to just, all right, like we need to do something different and change this up. But I've found another thing that's really helpful for this is having a notepad or something, whether it's by your bed or just something that you carry with you, some little thing like that, that when ideas start to come through or something, something that needs to get done that you maybe will forget about or something, that you can write it down and get it out of your head so that your mind doesn't have to keep wandering around it. Like there's something magical that happens when you write it down, and it gives your mind a chance to say, okay, that's in a safe place. Same with ideas, right? If you get an idea for something, it's really good to get that out somewhere on paper, in a notepad, or in a note program, somewhere where it won't get lost, so that your brain isn't like searching for it, or if you've ever felt that kind of worrying feeling like, oh man, I'm going to forget about that, I don't want to forget this, right? And of course you forget it. uh, or it torments you until you don't, right? And your mind is not resting through that. So mental rest, super important. Another one, kind of overlooked a lot, is resting for your senses. So think about the light, from the devices that we're in front of. You can't go anywhere without hearing, background music and things like that, or all this like sensory overload and things. There's a lot. There's just a lot of sensory stimulation. If you happen to be sensitive to that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But even people who aren't so sensitive to those sorts of things, it adds up over time, and it can make you irritable. It can just feel like, ooh, like it just world. I need like a little happy bubble from the world. And so giving your senses a rest is very, very helpful, right? And that can be a couple different things. One of them for sure is the eyes. Like we take in so much with our eyes. There's a practice called palming. It's really simple. You just kind of like warm up your hands a little bit, and then you see it's kind of like an upside down V, and you place your palms over your eyes and just sit there and breathe, right? Because it'll block out, make sure that it's set up. You don't want to have your hands be super tight, hands kind of relax, but on there enough that it blocks out the light, and just breathe just like that. Another one that a lot of people really like is noise canceling headphones. When there's a lot of noises and things around, you could pop in a pair of noise canceling headphones. They have in ear and over ear kinds, and don't, play anything through them. Just have it be noise canceling, and you can, be silent like that. Another one is sensory deprivation chambers. They call them like floating. So you go and it's like a little pod, and they'll when you lay in the water's full of like salts and minerals, and so you float. Like you'd have a hard time submerging yourself in that, and you just lay there and float. And we've got earplugs in to keep the water out of your ears, but it also helps to block out the sounds, and it is incredibly restorative. Even if you are a little bit claustrophobic, most of the pods are big enough that you might not, you don't usually sense so much of that. But it once you get used to it, is really incredibly restorative, and your body starts to get on board with like, oh man, it's safe for me to like really start restoring again. Because when we're taking in all this sensory information, our brain is trying to figure out what to do with all of that. And it needs space without it to let our body be like, oh yeah, I can totally just relax right now. So sensory rest, really, really important, especially in like this overstimulated world. Another one that I think about a lot is creative rest. So particularly if you are somebody who needs like constant flow of ideas. I have a history as a musician, and these days most of my work has some kind of creative aspect to it, whether it's writing, or whether it's making music, or whether it's heck, just writing an email or communicating with people, and working with people in the healing work that I do. There's a creative aspect to all of those things. And so it's really easy to just be in the flow of that. And then all of a sudden, it's just gone. I need an idea. I can't find an idea. Right. And it's very frustrating if you've ever had writer's block or some kind of creative block like that. Oh my gosh, is it frustrating? And if you rely on it for your work, it's terrifying. So lots of times we get into a really good flow with it, and it just comes naturally. Right. And then there's those times when it really starts to flag, or we really have to start to work for it. And usually that is because you've just sort of been overworking that muscle. And the best thing to allow that to rest and reset is connecting with that innate creative spirit that's already there inside of you. So what do I mean by that? Well, walking around in nature, this is definitely one way to do that, where you can just like not trying to make anything out of anything or put any extra meaning on anything, but just to recognize like the incredible uh, um, creative aspect of nature, just continually creating and recreating itself, to have that kind of wonderment and awe. And you can bring that same wonderment and awe into anything that you're doing. You can look around at people, sitting around at a mall and just people watching, and little sensory overload there sometimes. But if you don't, need that kind of rest, there's something to be said for just sitting there like, wow, like this is amazing. Look at all the wild things that people do. And you just sort of, without really being an active participant in that, you can just observe and have that kind of awe and gratitude, and those sorts of things can start to come up for you. And it's actually incredibly rejuvenating for creative spirit and creative energy, creative activity. So really, really helpful, but it doesn't always have to be, out in nature or something like that. For me, like some of the ways that I really enjoyed the creative reset is through art. To go to a museum, um, pop in a piece of music that I've never listened to before, something like that. I try to stay away from things that I've tread over again and again and again, because my mind starts to engage with those in different ways. Like if I listen to a symphony that I've listened to a million times, um, it's not to say that it's not a wonderful experience, but it is to say that my mind starts to interact with that in a different way because I have heard it so many times. But when it's something newer or fresh or something that I'm able to kind of like meet for the first time, well, that's very rejuvenating, right? And it gets, again, kind of connects with that creative spirit. That's one of the things I love about art, is this very human to human connection of the creative spirit, and to see like, wow, I can't believe that came out of somebody's brain, or that they created that. It's so cool to, as an observer, to be part of that creative process, right, on the other end of it. So that's for creative rest. Now, of course, there's also emotional rest. You can kind of look at this in two different ways. There's like emotional rest, and then there's maybe more social rest. Emotional rest, well, certainly has, if you're carrying a lot of heavy emotions or old emotions and things like that, you're going to feel fatigued by that over time. So that's where the tools, the healings that are in this course, the cord cutting and the grounding and those sorts of things really help to tame those emotions, so that you can release those in a more healthy way. Particularly the healings, but also, of course, the cord cutting and the grounding and the breathing. It helps all of that to just move, for you to get your feet on the ground, because that emotional energy really does need to move. It's not about suppressing it; it's about letting it move. But that doesn't mean it has to express out in a really uh, bombastic way, a very you know loud way. It just means that the energy needs to move. So other times, when this can start to add up, the emotional stuff is with other people. If you've got people in your life who are just, you've kind of, for whatever reason, you've become their receptacle for, all their negative emotions, or their tough day, or their struggles and all that stuff. This happens a lot of times with people who are, caring people, people who want to help others, right? You're the sort of people who people just kind of unload on. It's cool that they can do that. And if you're well trained in the energetics, then that's kind of part of the gig. It's not to say that you're just the dumping ground for people, but it is to say that a certain amount of that just naturally gets unloaded by who you are, and you need the really great skills to be able to clean that up. Best thing I can recommend for that kind of energy and that kind of situation is just come out and take a 2-day energy mastery class with me, and you'll have all the tools to do that and so much more. But emotional rest is giving yourself an opportunity to just really express what's going on. One of the mystics' messages for self-love was about not fast talking your way out of feeling what you're feeling, right? So that's a form of emotional rest, is just allowing yourself to express whatever emotions are coming up for you without making them right or wrong, or judging about how you should or shouldn't have that. Whatever the conversation is around that, it's a free expression of your emotions. It's helpful with other people. If you're doing that with another person, it's helpful to give them a little heads up, because it can be a little abrupt sometimes. So it's helpful to give them the idea of, hey, I just need to get this off my chest. You don't need to fix anything, but I just need to express a few things, if that's okay, right? You get their buy-in so that they know what they're in for there, and they can opt out if they want to. You can go find somebody else. But emotional rest gives you a freer flow. Like, you think about how many things that we feel in a certain day, and not all those things get dealt with. And lots of times, like, the uncomfortable things, they get tucked away, and it becomes like that energy can really get embedded and toxic in a lot of different ways. So it's important, like, this emotional hygiene is incredibly important, and just freely expressing that way is really, really helpful. If you can't find somebody else, or don't want to do that with somebody else, then just write in a journal. Just stream of consciousness, start writing in a journal and get that stuff out, because one way or the other, you want to get that out of you, and that'll give you some emotional rest. So around that, we mentioned, sort of along with that, is like social rest. This one is very important, because a lot of people who are introverts use this as an excuse to just not, right? To just hide away, and to not get out there and not be around other people. It's like, oh, I'm an introvert. Well, so am I. All right. Like, very introverted. You can ask Kisma, you can ask anybody that knows me. They'll tell you. I'm a very, very introverted person. Uh, but if I use that as an excuse to not do what I'm here to do, I'm going to be a very frustrated person. My life is not going to be very fulfilling, and it's just going to be a very, very small existence that won't have the kind of abundance and prosperity and joy and laughter and creativity that I really value in my life. So making sure that we don't use that as an excuse, while recognizing that, hey, being around people can be a little taxing sometimes. Feeling like you're on, right? Being, the focus that it takes to really be with a person, especially if you're socializing with people and they're, maybe you're in a noisy environment, or there's other things going on, like really giving somebody your full attention is not always, that can take a little bit of a toll, especially for introverted people. So recognizing, where your limits are around that, and giving yourself the rest that you need. Like, if you're constantly in a situation where you're around people and having to deal with people and things like that, and you are an introvert, you are definitely going to need a little bit more rest time and alone time. And it's best if there's people in your life. They may kind of intuitively know that, but it's really helpful to communicate that and keep communicating that to them, so that they can understand and respect your space. It's like, I love you, honey, and I've been around a lot of people today. I just need a little time to reset myself. When you give yourself permission to do that, you can really accept that rest more fully, and it works so much more quickly. That's the amazing part. Like, a little bit goes a long ways. If you've ever had a really beautiful 15-minute power nap and you wake up, you're refreshed, like that is not a full night's sleep, but you got a whole day ahead of you, right? Same kind of way with some of these other rests, 5 minutes with your hands over your eyes and just taking some nice deep breaths. And it's like, whoa, I can see clearly again. The eyes can get very congested with all of the energy that's coming at them. So a little bit goes a long ways. One last one I wanted to mention here uh, is spiritual rest. So, spiritual practices, I think a lot of times, can have over efforting in them, right? It, it, our spiritual lives, for me anyway, I'll speak for myself. My spiritual life is something that is very exciting, and like, I'm the mystic next door. Like, I want to know all the secrets and mysteries. I want to know all this stuff, right? But it can drive us to just be constantly like taking in, a new text, reading a new thing, trying to learn something new. And it becomes this kind of over efforting in our spiritual lives that actually takes away from the joy of it, the fun of it, right? And the really adventurous nature of it, as well as those teachings need a they need some time to really settle in and to start to really germinate and grow and develop in our lives. So when there's that constant influx of information and we're not really giving ourselves a chance to take that into our lives, to really experiment with it and try it out, take it for a test ride and play around and see like, well, how does this apply? Like what happens when I do this, then it just becomes about just getting more information in. And that is not what spirituality is about. So spiritual rest is about really respecting the idea that it takes time for these things to develop. And it takes a lot of, it takes diligence with your energy, because the spiritual energy can be dirty just like any other energy, right? Just because your crown is here, it doesn't mean that your crown, is clean and that it's functioning at its best, or any different than your basic, chakra, or your sex chakra for that matter. So really understanding that like you need the right kind of energy to really serve and support that. That helps to give that spiritual rest so that as you do take things in, they can really land, right? Accelerating the process of spiritual development. And I mean that not in the sense of like there's a finish line, but I think like sometimes like, wow, like we really want to experience this growth and expansion. And there's no reason that it has to be long and hard and a spiritual battle with dark nights of the souls around every corner. That's like, no, like we don't need to do that. But it is to say that we can accelerate that process in a beautiful way, in a graceful way. And one of the key components of that is the energy that we have and allow to fuel that, right? So that's another place where working with your energy, particularly the energy mastery system, and learning how to work with your energy in a very skillful way helps to take a lot of the chatter out, and it helps these things to land with us and land in our lives in a different way. It becomes more embodied more quickly because there's not these layers of buildup that inhibit that process. And it supports your physical health and vitality to support that as well. Okay, that's a really important piece about spiritual development, is the actual physical resilience and the resilience of the energetic containers to be able to support that in your life. And the cleaner that those things can be, the more naturally that you can absorb that and put it into your life in a really meaningful way. So when it comes to spiritual practices in general, but spiritual rest, less is more oftentimes. Deep teachings come and reveal the beauty of them through time, through reflection, through really giving ourselves the opportunity to be with that. Could take any simple aphorism and break it down in a million different ways and really explore, and it'll be a gift that keeps on giving. Right? As you think, so you become. I've heard it a million times. To really understand what that means in our lives and live it, that's a little different story. What more do you need than that? Truly. But we do, like other things, and giving ourselves the rest around that. So there's some different kinds of rest to think about, some things to consider. When you're feeling fatigued in different ways, this helps to dial it in. Hey, there's a lot of things that a nap fixes, right? If you just lay down, you get some sensory care. It gets, your brain maybe gets a chance to be quiet for a minute, and all those sorts of things. But you can really be mindful with the different kinds of rest that you give yourself if you're aware of, hey, I think I might be needing a little bit of this kind of rest. So that's my hope for you here. And that's, I hope this video is helpful for you in order to do that. I think it'll make a great supplemental training for the foundation of self-care. And I'd love to hear what you think about it. So chime in the comments below and let me know how it lands for you. Okay. I hope you have an amazing day, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Peace.